So thank you everyone for joining us today. As you can see, we are joined by Debbie Cooper. Debbie is an artist, curator and producer. She works for Format as a producer. She a digital artist training curator for Quad and is the manager of the Photographic Collections Network, as well as an artist in her own right. And she'll be talking to Sian today about her practice. So I'll let Debbie introduce Sian.
Thanks, Neve. So I've got the pleasure today of talking to Sian Bonnell. Many of you know her. She is the most amazing woman. Sian is a UK-based artist, curator and educator. Her work is concerned with photography and its relations with performance, performing for the camera, sculpture and the objects in the camera. Trace, as many of you may know, is her curation and publishing project, which was established in 1999 and has supported many key British photographers over the years. And since 2014, she has curated an annual exhibition of UK graduate photography for the Pinyao International Photography Festival in China, and was going to be doing it in Wuhan, but this happened. Sian regularly reviews portfolios at international photo festivals, including Format. Thanks very much, Sian. She has judged major competitions, including the Jerwood Photography Prize, Taylor Wessing Portrait Award and the National Portrait Gallery in 2009. She was awarded an honorary fellowship at the Royal Photographic Society in 2010 for her contribution to fine art photography, and the following year she was awarded the Photoworks Senior Research Fellowship at the British School in Rome, and her images have been exhibited and published widely. Her work is held in many public and corporate collections, notably the V&A Museum, Museum of Fine Arts in Houston, Texas, and the Ransom Center in Texas, and the Bibliothèque Nationale Paris. And she is currently a reader in Willful Amateurism in the School of Fashion at Manchester Metropolitan University. So welcome, Sian, and wow, you've done so much and do so much. And it's been a pleasure knowing you over the last few years through Format and talking to you about different artists' work. But today's also a chance to share your amazing work. So we're going to be introducing your early practice and then moving on to the work you've done with Trace and how those interact. So maybe you could start by sharing with me some of your early work.
Yeah.
Great to see what works you've got to share with us today.
I'm just going to get rid of the. Is this poll? Can you all see
it should
that?
be gone. I shall.
Oh, I've just got rid of it off my.
Close that.
Thank you, Debbie, for a really generous introduction, and also to Format for inviting me to come today and speak to everybody. It's a real honour to be here. Okay, so. We had a kind of brief intro conversation the last couple of days, which I really enjoyed, and we were talking. Debbie was asking me to start off with some early things, and then we decided to frame it a little bit around residencies. I've done a number of residencies and have found that to be a particularly rich source of just engagement with my practice, I suppose. And but I've started off today with this, which is this goes right back to the very, very beginning. This is 1981, and this is my degree show, and it's about the right time of year to show degree show work. So this was mine. I studied at Chelsea School of Art, and I didn't study. I wasn't a photography graduate at all. I've never actually studied photography. I kind of learnt it on the way. So I'm very much self-taught, and I was a really terrible sculptor. As you can see, I didn't make sculpture. I just made a bit of a mess, and I was very interested in places where things might happen, or places where sculptures might go to start with, and so it was very much about the site first of all, where you site things, where things might happen, so kind of latency and spaces where a kind of promise of something to unfold, but we don't know what. And this one, I was just given this space, to this room to work in, and I just threw paint at it for 3 months, and then this was kind of the result, and I kind of drew all over the walls, and it could have been a complete, I mean, we did actually think it was going to be a complete disaster, because they all said to me just before my degree show, it was like, well, where's the sculpture? And I said, doesn't really need it, this is it, you know. And they said, well, you've got 24 hours to put a bit of sculpture in that space, so, you know, you could redeem yourself. And I said, no, I can't, this is it, you know. So, and I really thought I'd failed. So so it was kind of early willfulness, I suppose. So yeah, this is kind of the first beginnings, and then a little bit later, this is a bit of a jump, when sort of moving on 10 years, having got married, had two very small, well, there were 2 babies, really, 2 children under 2, and had moved to the countryside in Dorset, and in the wilds of Dorset, and I was just using drawings, and I was sort of working with just the colours around me in the landscapes, and working with that. And then I didn't have anywhere to work. I didn't have a space. I just had my kitchen, and just the home, really. And it was like that for a very long time. Still, I mean, I've got a studio now, but it's taken a long, long time. So I suppose one of the reasons I started doing residencies was because at least I'd get somewhere to work. So this was the earlier things. And then I used to just go for walks and go out with the camera. I managed to get childcare for one afternoon a week. I swapped with other mums, and so I actually had sort of like a window of 2 to 3 hours once a week on a Wednesday afternoon, and so whatever the weather, I went out and just sort of made some pictures with my camera. And at this point as well, I had joined up with an independent photographers group called Dorset Independent Photographers Group, and it was really about 6 men and me, and they were all really experienced photographers. They were all, you know, everyone had their own darkroom. I actually did have a darkroom at this point, and they were all working with quite big cameras, you know, so much bigger format. These are just 35mm slide film, and so I was kind of like just working with just pointing and shooting, really, I suppose, and also working alongside that with the drawings and just sort of just noting the colours. So they were very, very formal studies. It was kind of more painterly than anything, and then once I'd sort of started doing these, and also the discussions with the other members of the group, we'd meet about once every 6 weeks. I didn't feel I could contribute very much to that canon of landscape photography. They were all landscape photographers. It was very much about the landscape, and all black and white, and very serious and technical. And I just felt I needed to be able to sort of put my own perspective in, and of course my perspective was very much in the home. So it was sorry, my phone's ringing, which I wasn't expecting.
It needs to happen. I'm expecting a knock at the door any moment.
So I'm just going to put it on the other side of the room.
No problem.
Yes, so I'm rambling here. So I'm not sure if you wanted me to sort of stop for breath and let you speak.
Well, when we talked about this work the other day, I really enjoyed seeing how you'd responded. So you joined this group of photographers, and I know I've been in those groups and had some similar people come to workshops who often all they care to talk about is the technical side, and you can sometimes feel that you're in the wrong place or on the back foot. But I loved how you responded against that when they're all out taking photographs of landscapes, and you do it your own way, which also links to how you responded to your tutors saying, well, you've got to put sculpture in. You're like, well, I'm not going to. And I love this sort of quiet resistance that exists throughout all your practice. And I'm quite intrigued as to your response to the landscape that everyone was doing. You started bringing in domestic items to explore a new way of doing it, and I'd love you to talk a bit more about that.
Well, with this work, what had happened was that because we, this was, I've got my pointer thing here, so that was Portisham, the village that we lived in, and it was just inland from Chesil Beach, which is there. It's a pebble beach, like a kind of lagoon in front of it, and then the sea, so that's the sea behind, and it was a really beautiful part of the world. And we'd go off and have family walks at weekends, and I always used to collect things. I still do. Whenever I go on walks, I'll bring things back like pebbles and shells and feathers, but you don't really tend to do anything with them. And I was thinking, and then also when you see a pebble or a shell or something lying around on a shelf, and then you'll just think, oh, I remember that day when I did that walk, and the conversation can come back to you. So it's kind of like it's a sort of a container for memory, or for a nice afternoon, or something pleasant or not. And so I was just intrigued with this idea of what would happen if I turned it on its head. And because I was feeling quite enclosed and claustrophobic inside, which is why whenever I got an opportunity, I went out. And I just filled my pockets. I had a coat with some big pockets. I just would put quite discreet objects in my pockets, and then just take them out into the landscape, and just sort of juxtapose it with the land and see what would happen, you know. And interestingly, once I started working a bit more with this particular image, it was interesting to note that you can read pictures, because there was a lot more going on in this picture than initially. It's not just a sheep shape biscuit cutter. This was something that I used every day. I used to make sandwiches for my boys in sheep shape, just to encourage them to eat their lunch. And then so this meant something, this cutter, and to put it out of the kitchen and into the land. And of course, this is sheep grazing land here, and this is Dorset, and it's all made of chalk. So underneath that grass is chalk downland, and Dorset is famous for chalk cut figures. So, you know, instantly we've got all these sort of other things, descriptors coming into the picture that you can sort of unravel, and I found that quite intriguing, and I started sort of introducing other domestic things. So this is an actual frozen blancmange bunny, which I put in.
I love that you've got a blancmange bunny in the wild, in amongst the trees and bushes.
Yeah, it's in a bunny habitat. And but what was intriguing, and this was quite scary, is that if you look closely, you know, this bunny it's really sinister, and it's a kind of not very nice bunny, which I wasn't expecting that at all. And in fact, it was pink as well, which is another odd thing. This also was speaking to this notion of, well, at the time, they were highly political, these pictures, because there is, I do have a kind of political underpinning to what I do. And these were very ecological, because it was all about BSE what we were doing to the landscape and despoiling it, and worry and fear as a mother of young children, of the future, and what were we eating, and what was that going to do to us. And so I always used to take this is why I froze them. Very good friend of mine, I had been running up and down hills with live blancmanges, if you see what I mean, not frozen, and
Probably kind.
yes, slapping them on the rocks, and then they'd all kind of disintegrate and everything. I'd be so disappointed. And my friend Julie said to me one day, she said, why don't you freeze it? And I thought, well, that's a brilliant idea. So that's what I used to do, is just take little freezer bags full of these frozen rabbits and plunk them in different places. And so that's what happened with this one. And the question, and also the fact that I was deadly serious. I was deadly serious, but people just would laugh at these pictures, and that I found very, very off-putting. The idea that people could laugh at my work, and I realise it's perfectly okay, because humour is a really nice way to sort of pull your audience in. And to you, so that it's a kind of tool that you can use. But at the time, I was actually kind of felt I had failed rather miserably, the fact that people were laughing at the work. And but I think after a while, as long as it isn't too absurdly stupid, and I've done enough of that over the years, where it kind of, if I can get it hovering on that line of between absurdity and madness, I'm quite happy with that, especially if it's got a slightly discomforting feeling to it as well.
I enjoyed that about your work. There's so many multi-layers with the political notions, but also the humour and the playfulness, and also the refusal to back down. You want to make a statement and you're going to make it however you feel fit, and I think that's really engaging and really brave in your work.
Well, I think the thing is that sometimes you do end up feeling a bit of an idiot as well. So, and that's happened to me a few times. But if I'm going to learn from it, then it's okay, And if it's going to sort of make the work extend onwards a bit, then that's something I can. It's only me that's going to feel stupid, so it's kind of okay. And it took me a long time to learn that. I had to wait till I was in my 40s before I realised that actually it's perfectly okay to look a complete idiot and in front of everybody. It's not a sort of big deal. This work, this was from the same series, but it was talking about history and sort of, again, land use, but land kind of the way it changes. And so we have a kind of domestic biscuit cutter in the shape of Stegosaurus, but then it's sitting on a real ammonite that would have existed when Stegosauruses did. So that was kind of interesting to me as well. Once we mentioned about this notion of going off to residencies. This would have been about in 1998, around now. And this was my first one. This was called Exmouth Documenta, and it was set up by Plymouth University. I had started teaching there that year, just as a hourly paid associate lecturer, and they had this old customs house in Exmouth by the sea, or on the estuary, just as it comes into the sea. And my friend Judith and I went to have the weekend. We had the weekend in this customs house. She had the upstairs and I had the downstairs. And I've put this picture in because for me this was really helped to shift things forward in a different way, in that at the time I was thinking, well, I don't know, I'm just making a bit of a mess on this floor. This was seaweed and various shells that I'd found, and then a plastic starfish and a plastic lobster. And I'd kind of was using this notion of the coastline. The project title for the whole residency was for a much larger project called Littoral, which means coastal. So I had this notion of where the land and the sea meet, and so this was my imagined coastline, you know, the land with this rather awful carpet, and this lino was the sea, and so it was like playing with this notion of where the sea and the land meet. And I realised that I could probably get away with using my imagination a bit more, so that's why I've put this picture in.
Did you say this photograph was taken at is it the Coast Guard's office?
Yes, so this big splodge was where the photocopier had been, and I did a lovely piece with this carpet. This is before digital happened. I think if we'd had a digital camera, this piece would have worked really well. But I spent practically the whole weekend painting every tip of these leaves with glow-in-the-dark paint, Kiddy's glow-in-the-dark paint, and just painting the tips with it. And when it got dark, all you could see with it was really lovely. I want to do it again, you know. So this is another of my revisited things. Now that I've got a digital camera, I could probably do it. I just need to find a carpet like this. So if anyone,
plenty of those in some old pubs, I bet you'll find.
Yeah, but if anyone's got one, I'm interested. Just not a whole big one, but just something, you know, sort of room sized. If they know of one, please let me know, and I'll come and paint it with them.
That's quite an offer. If you have a carpet like this, Sian will come and paint it for you.
I will.
I wish I did, actually. I wish I could say yes.
Yeah. So, yes. So that was great to do that, and it was very liberating as well, because although we were meant to sort of come up with work at the end, which we all did, it was interesting for me because I was able to sort of stretch myself a bit more and think about how I might progress things.
We talked quite a lot about residencies, didn't we? Because it's something that I do a lot in my practice as well. And there's that mixture of the pressure, but it can also be quite a release that you're responding to something that you wouldn't respond to otherwise in a space that you would never normally go. And it can make big changes in your work, but also it's a lot of pressure to produce in often quite a short amount of time.
Yes, it is quite pressured, but also the interesting thing as well is that usually the people that you find there, or if you're on your own, because quite often I've done them where it's just me, you know, there's nobody else there, so I don't have to really, you know, it is performative, but I don't have to be me. So it's like I could be just this other person in this strange place, and so that gives me permission to go and do something completely different that I wouldn't normally do. So that I quite like that freedom that you get with them as well. Right, I can. So I thought I'd throw a couple of these in because this is. So this is from When the Domestic Meets the Wild, which was a year later. It's about 99, and roughly around the same time that I set Trace up as well. So I was just trying to show. We were talking the other day about what was I doing when I set up Trace, and you know, so what was the sort of thinking alongside it, and this was just moving on the initial project where I had discrete things in my pocket, and these were slightly less discrete. So you know, quickest way to empty a beach, literally, you know, is walk on there with your ironing board very purposefully, and they will march off.
Fantastic. For anyone going to a beach that's too busy, we now know to take an ironing board. But I love the idea of seeing you walking down purposefully to the beach with all these brooms and brushes and feather dusters and ironing boards, and people's faces must have been very surprised at the time.
Yeah, well, that first one, this last, this one was Chesil Beach. So literally just out of shot, there's a whole load of fishermen. So it was very masculine, that beach. So that was a bit strange. I think they all were a bit horrified when I turned up with my mops. And this was a different beach. This was over, I can't remember where it is, but it was sort of the other side of the bay, of Weymouth Bay. And yeah, had a lot of families there.
Of course,
then,
now with smartphones, people probably be recording you doing this and placing that on Facebook as well.
Well, you see, that's why I don't do it anymore. And then these, it was kind of moving it on from being, I suppose in a way, when I was doing the black and white stuff, part of the reason why I thought I could put these disparate things into the landscape, I thought, well, they're going to be black and white, so they're all going to be the same tonal value, so they're kind of in the same landscape. It's a black and white one, so it doesn't, they kind of look as though they're meant to be there. And then, using colour, suddenly you're playing with this idea of, well, this is absolutely at complete odds to the landscape, in that it's really high key colour and quite jarring. And so what's going on here? And it was kind of dealing with real notions of unease and discomfort. So, because of using barbed wire and prickly scourers, it's not nice, and it's not comfortable. So those were the sort of drivers of this. So the fact that home is not the safest of places, and is quite dark. So although it's very, very jolly looking with these bright colours, it's a really dark series. So I don't know where, so and then we set this up. So we moved from the countryside to Weymouth into this house that used to be a funny shop. It was a newsagent's, and it was called Bunty News, which I loved the title, Bunty News, but George I wanted to call Trace Bunty News, and George was like, no way, you're not calling it that. So we called it Trace, and I set it up with another friend of mine, a very lovely friend called Julian Wilkinson, and she and I were going to do it together, and but she had life events which sort of took over, and so she wasn't able to sort of join in, but we both came up with the title Trace. And this house, which was an old shop, lent itself very well because it was lovely light in there. We'd moved from a very tiny place, so we didn't really have any furniture to speak of, and we had, we couldn't afford very much. So we furnished it really cheaply, painted all the floors, put rush matting down, and just, had budget white walls, and just used colour on the actual paintwork things. And we were thinking of the colours of the sea because we were 2 blocks back from the beach. So all the paintwork was sort of blue, and all the floors were sort of sand coloured, and so it's like the seaside, and that's how it was. And also initially when we set up Trace, we were interested in the sort of literary, I don't know how that happened, how people are, artists are quite often inspired by not necessarily other artists' work or other artworks, but usually maybe literature, poetry, music, other things, anyways, a different discipline. And I was intrigued by that, and because of course I was very interested in writing and literature, and that sort of fed into my work. So that was the driver initially to start with. And this is very, very lovely artist and close friend of mine called Patricia Townsend, and this is her work. She was making work on mythology, and I'm sorry, I'm a little bit nervous, I cannot remember the title of this piece, so afraid I'm not going to say it, but I can let people know afterwards if they want to know. So she'd written poems and she'd made these photographs, and you had to walk on this photograph to get into the exhibition. And people were very, very reticent to do that. They were like, no, we have to jump over it, or we take our shoes off. So no, Pat wants you to walk on this, and it's vinyl, it's perfectly okay, won't hurt it. But I think as well, the fact that it was this cavern as well, you could see right down, it was a kind of chasm, and it was a bit disconcerting. The other thing to say about this was, it's gone out of my head. I'll move on. Oh no, I can't move on.
What was the impetus to start using your home as an exhibition space?
Oh, well, that's right. It's come back. Thank you. The impetus was the fact that we were living in Dorset's very nice, and it's very beautiful. But at the time, this was in the early, late 90s, early 2000s, there wasn't a lot going on in terms of art, and it was all very traditional, and it wasn't the sort of thing that I was particularly interested in. And I wanted to show work that I wanted to see. And also we had so many amazing friends who were brilliant artists, and we had this house that lent itself to, you know, showing work. And it was like, well, we don't need money, we can just do it. And again, you know, it's this thing of, if everyone said you can't do this without funding, you've got to get the Arts Council to fund you first. And I thought, well, that's just not going to happen, because I never am very good at fundraising applications, and also why wait for permission? You know, why don't we just do it? You know, and it was like, well, you can fail, so you can do it and fail, or you can do it and surprise yourself. And it was like, well, let's do it and see what happens. And that's kind of like, as we've discussed already, that's how I function. So, and this is how this all started off.
That's why we called today's talk the Without Permission, isn't it? Because there's so many key points in your work where you've gone, well, if I ask, I won't do this. So what happens if I just get on and do it? And it's incredibly inspiring that you've gone on and done so many things and started Trace, and it's an incredibly interesting story.
Well, I suppose it's just bloody mindedness as much as anything. And but the thing is that if you did wait for permission, you wouldn't, because I did wait for permission, it didn't come. So it was like, well, I'd been waiting sort of 10 years for things. And I suppose that's what pushed me into publishing other people's work as well, is this idea of, well, you can do, if you can make an exhibition in your home, you can publish a book. So it's the same kind of thing. So the first year there was only really a couple of shows, and they just happened over a month. It was a long time, and too long. So we were learning all the time what was right. And then I went on another, this is another residency in 2000, another one of the same Plymouth ones, but this time it was for 2 weeks, and it was in the Bay du Mont Saint-Michel. And I just had to respond to the Bay. And I was given a studio and a workplace, and it was also, I had to leave a piece of work there at the end, which would be there for the entire summer. So this was late June 2000, and so this. I made 2 bodies of work that came out of that. That's not really ever been seen, and this was called Souvenirs, du Mont Saint-Michel, and these were just things that I'd found in the beach and on the sea sides, or things that people had given me that I'd met while I was there. And so this is, and in every single picture there is, you'll see the just in the background here, in every picture there will be, you know, the Mont Saint-Michel will be there. I was obsessed with it. And also the people that lived there, I've discovered, the French, were obsessed with it too, and they absolutely loved it. And they had their own set. The reason I was interested in the souvenirs was because they had official souvenirs that belonged, that were official, that could be sold in the shop, and some of them were very strange indeed. but this wasn't. This was actually a scale model of the Mont, which I was given by the architect who was working on the shop. I think he'd sort of designed the shop. So and then I met the mayor of the nearby town with the people that were there, and he took a bunch of us out to these amazing islands, like the Channel Islands, but they're the French version, in the Normandy, just off the Normandy coast, and very, very shallow water. And when at low tide, the islands all joined up into one big place. And but when the sea was in and out, it was half in, half out all the time. It was this amazing shallows with beautiful shells and incredible seaweeds and things. So, and I was just sort of using some other souvenirs that I'd found that were sort of artificial ones, and putting them in the water. This is 2 fish molds. I had a fish mold with me, of course. I took a mold.
I love that you're still exploring this and bringing your own fish and placing them in the water.
Yeah, and this is frozen watercolor, and with paint. So watercolor paint, frozen water, and then sort of let off into the sea. It didn't last very long, but I was just intrigued the way the sun shone through the fish. So you've got these blue and green shadows on the bottom, and yeah. Anyway, so that was quite playful, and that's one of the very special shells that you can only get there. So that was pretty amazing. And then I had been collecting shells and pomme de pin, which you've got to be very careful how you say pomme de pin. I might have said it wrong again, because that's kind of anyway, I won't say any more about that because it's very rude. And feathers, and then I made a rug. So this was a rug, and they were just stuck down very gently with double-sided tape. Could easily be moved. And this was an old schoolhouse that I was in. This was my space. And then I left this rug there for 2 months over the summer holidays. And when I came back in middle September, it was exactly the same. It hadn't moved, nothing had changed, which is incredible, because if we had left that rug anywhere in the UK, it would have been completely trashed in seconds. The minute I'd walked out, someone would have come in and trashed it. And that's just something that I have noticed about European audiences. They really love art. They really love and respect it. And I think this is something I think they learn it in education. It's just not something that we've ever been taught. And I think it's a big shame. And anyway, I just thought I'd throw that in. But that was quite intriguing. It was lovely to make this, because it's the first piece of sculpture I'd made in many, many years. So it wasn't, it was a kind of installation piece, but it was nice. It was very nice to do. And then just the following year, started to get a bit more adventurous as to inviting people. So this is Jem Southern. And at a time when he wasn't really getting that many shows, although it was just at the point when he was about to get hundreds. And I honestly don't think we had anything to do with it, but it was really an amazing opportunity to actually show these rockfall pieces in my front room. And he'd had just come down from the photographer's gallery, where he had the whatever it was at the time. It wasn't the Deutsche Börse, because it changed, but it was before that, this big photography prize, which he didn't win, which I think he should have done. But he'd made this other series of work, which was called the Horizontal's Desire for the Vertical, which I absolutely love, and has only really been shown with us. So it was wonderful to show that work. And this is smaller camera. When Jem described how he would be leaning out on the edges of very high cliff tops and photographing these little plants that just hanging on with their tiny roots. And then as the rocks are eroded, you know, they fall off, and then they would be in clumps underneath the rock falls, and growing in sort of strange plants that shouldn't be there. So there was just this idea of growing upwards, and anyway, a very beautiful poetic piece of work, and lovely to have in the house.
We're very modest, Sian, about your support for the photographers, but you've enabled many photographers to have exhibitions, and you've published works, and I think been a driving force more than you realise in many people's careers. But you've in particular shown a lot of people's work when they were possibly at a lull, where they weren't necessarily getting the shows that their work deserved. And I think there's some really interesting photographers that you've supported through Trace.
Yeah, I hope that that's very nice of you to say that. I don't know that is necessarily altogether true, but it's been, you know, it's been very much a kind of two-way street. So it's been wonderful for us to show that work as well. And certainly in the case of Susan Durges, you know, she was very much supporting us by letting us have this work. This was at a time when I think most places have these art weeks, don't they? We had Dorset Art Week, where artists and Sunday painters throw open their studios for a week, and people can go around and on a trail and visit and everything. And we were doing Dorset Art Week, and we thought, well, we don't necessarily want to show our work. How nice would it be to actually get somebody really amazing in to Dorset that you wouldn't normally get, and to show that work and bring something to the county and to the community. And so that was the reason we asked Susan to work with us, and that was incredible. And we had the most amazing weekend of a talk as well. And we had Charlotte Cotton came and did a talk, and in conversation with Susan, which I've got a video of. We've got an amazing archive of video talks of things that we've had, and I'm waiting to get some time to actually sort the website out and to get it all sorted, and I just need to get permissions again from people to do it. But so one of the real high points, you know, is to sort of showcase, actually have it in your house was amazing. And it was terrifying with small children, and trying to steer them away from these incredible, unique pieces of work. You know, it was kind of...
What would problems be having though, Sian, to be worrying about the high quality artwork on your walls? But they're beautiful prints. It's great to spend time.
They really were. Yeah, it was fantastic. So that was amazing. And this is another show. Somebody that some people might not have heard of, and weirdly her name will come back to me again in a minute, because I told you her name the other day, didn't I? And it's gone out of my head.
Sian took some notes down of the artist's work that Neve did. So if Neve, if you can remember, you can hop into the chat and let us know. When you showed me this work the other day, I also mentioned that it's not often that galleries or art spaces step up and show political work, and I thought that's really interesting and something you've never shied away from, which is really interesting, because this work is about the election. Is that right?
Yes, Natalie Latham has come back. Natalie Latham, who is an Australian artist, and she was at the time based in Paris. I think she's gone back. I think she's based in either India or she might still be back in Paris again. Anyway, she went around America, and this would have been, I think, around the time of George Bush, just before he got elected. And so it was quite a key election. And she went all over the States and asked everybody, do you vote? And she asked these three questions. What do you think the portraits of the priorities of the present administration are, and what would you like the priorities of the next administration to be, and how would you like the rest of the world to perceive the USA? So these are all the same questions she asked everybody, and then she photographed either the person that she was asking if they wanted to have their picture taken, or photograph, if they didn't want their picture, where they were. So, you know, literally where they were, or what they could see. And so they're all different, but they're all the same size. And they're all these tiny postcards that were literally just round the wall. So there's about 40 of them. And then we invited Lord Jim Knight. Now, he wasn't at the time, it was Jim Knight. He was our local MP, first Labour MP, probably in Dorset, I think. And he was in the most marginal seat possible, and it was the Blair government. And yeah, so it was a really interesting time. And it was very interesting to have Jim come and do this in conversation with us, a kind of panel discussion. I can't remember who else was there, but there was, you know, it was really interesting. And sort of 40 people came in, so we had 40 people in the front room. Was lucky for us because my son Ollie was very good friends with Jim's son Fergus. They both in the same class at school. That's how we were able, you know, it's just using your children to sort of get your artists to come along, but and people.
Well,
so
it's all about who you know, Sian, even if
it
it's
is, yeah, it was a bit cheeky, but anyway, it was Jim was great, and it was very interesting to have this show on and to be sort of really focused on something that wasn't necessarily artistic, or, you know, much more to do with politics and everything. I want to do more of that sort of thing with Trace in the future. I was quite intrigued with all of that. And then a bit soon after that, this is part of the UE in Bristol, their fine art book, fine art print research centre, and they have this massive artist book collection and resource. And this was in the early days of that. They've been going a while, but at the time, and there's I think 111 books, and this was called Arcadia Id Est, and it was a touring show, and we were the first port of call on the touring show. And the thing was that we never had to ask for shows to come in. We didn't need to advertise or do open calls. People would just say, we've got this exhibition, we'd like to do it here. And it was, you know, so things like this was completely interesting. It was like, well, we've never done this before, so this will be nice. And so we just, you know, opened the house up, and this was the first showing of this work. And I think after us, it went straight to Australia, and then it toured around the world. So that was, you know, it's just amazing, interesting things to do. And then a bit later, it's 2003, this was a rolling show, a kind of what I would sort of think of now as a sort of viral exhibition, where you start off with one show and it works into another one. There was 4 women portrait photographers. I wanted to do something around portrait, and I didn't call it women, obviously. So this is very amazing artist, Karen Brett, who I think is incredibly underrated and deserves much more exposure. And really amazingly brave work as well. This was called The Myth of Sexual Loss. And I don't know if one could get away with showing this stuff in, you know, nowadays. This would, you know, but at the time it was quite edgy to show it. And she had been in touch with these elderly people that were all still sexually active. They're not all having sex in these pictures. They're, you know, it was just sort of, but it was to do with the fact that, you know, people can be close together and love each other at whatever age, you know. So it was kind of very beautiful, and but also quite sort of edgy as well. And so we were absolutely thrilled with this show, and we had these lovely old couple. I remember that they were very, very straight-laced and very, very kind of middle class and proper, and they were sort of, you know, in their 60s, and they turn up and they were very, very neat and tidy, and it was sort of like Saturday afternoon. We always did tea and cake, for everybody that turned up, and they stayed ages. They loved the show, and they were talking amongst themselves and everything. And every time, because we opened about 3 times a week, and it was on for about 2 weeks, and they turned up every time, and they even phoned up, and they came nearly every day to see it. And I couldn't help thinking that, you know, it had sort of sparked something in their relationship, and that they were, you know, it kind of, so it was like almost like a kind of Tracer's Marge Proops, sorting out sort of elderly love affair or something. It was very, anyway. And this is Michelle Sank, and showing her young men, which is amazing work, obviously, as well. And then this is Trish Morrissey. She was, and this is another thing that Trace does quite often, is I've got to apologise for the yellow on these slides. They do look a bit rubbish, but it's because the original pictures, which were analog, and we had terrible lighting, and it was winter time. It was just November, December, and so the electric lights were on, so that's why they look a bit dodgy. And I couldn't spend long enough getting them less yellow. That's my apology for.
I don't think it's needed. This is great work. It's lovely to hear.
The work is wonderful. Anyway, this was, I know that, well, Trish wanted to test out the work. It was like, how big should it be? What does it look like in a space? Which order should they go in? And I just said, why don't you have the house and you can just test it out, you know? So that's how we did. And of course it was wonderful to show this work. So we got a kind of sneak preview showing of it before it launched in 2007, so sort of about a year earlier.
That's one of the many great things about Trace, is you've enabled artists also to test work before they show it elsewhere and get, you know, engagement and feedback and explore how it looks in a space, which is not always an easy thing to do.
And I think Camilla, pretty certain Camilla did the In Conversation for this one as well, which was brilliant. So we had an In Conversation with Camilla Brown and Trish, and if I remember rightly, Terence Pepper turned up. You know, amazing. People just turn up out of the blue that you wouldn't expect. It was amazing.
Camilla says yes, she did, and she has fond memories.
It was like, I think, yes, it was very special. And then we had, I think the thing is that I realised around this time that Trace wasn't really about audiences. And of course, if you're going for funding or any of those things, usually it's always about the audience and always about who is going to sort of consume that work, you know. And I realised that my real impetus for all of it was to support artists, to give them thinking space and testing. Really important to test work, test ideas, to have the opportunity to fail, you know, and but a safe place to do it in, you know, and that's what we do, and we continue to do that. And we have the shed now. I haven't got pictures of the shed. I should have done, but I can do it later. But yes, so that was that. And then this is another wonderful artist, Magali Nugared, who was making portraits at the time. She did this wonderful work called Towing the Line, and where she'd photograph older people and very young people, and it was all along in Eastbourne, but just incredible pictures, and these don't do it justice really. So it was and it was lovely to sort of have this rolling on-off program of events, and I think Michelle and Magali, we did a show with them at Tom Blau Gallery later in London. So they had, I think it might have been both of them's first London show. So well, it was certainly my first curated London show. So that was, and we showed slightly different work again, but that was wonderful too. And then, well, we had to sort of find a way of funding what we did. And what we had been doing up until this point was something called the Trace Edition, where we would ask every single artist that had showed with us to make an edition that we would sell at the opening, and we would sell it and sort of split the proceeds of the sale with the artist. So basically, Trish Morris's edition sale, which was oh, it's not there. I thought it was there. Trish Morris's one was, because it was very reasonably priced, like they all are, they're all £200. The V&A bought it for their collection. And I think this was the other thing that Trace was able to do, was to sort of help artists to get into really good collections as well. Yeah. And so this happened. And anyway, so the edition was very popular. And we needed to get some funding for the next programs that we wanted to do, because I was so excited about the Nexus series, which was the sort of conjoined portrait lot. I wanted to do a lot more, and this was I was with this gallery at the time, and they were so generous in that they liked what I was doing with Trace, as well as supporting my own practice. And they said, how can we help Trace? They said, would you like the gallery? And you could do a sale. And I said, that'd be incredible. So I had their space for a week. So in Cork Street, it was amazing. And the week just happened to coincide with Photo London, the first ever Photo London. So, this was incredible. And we just invited anybody we could think of, the biggest names we could think of, amazing, wonderful artists like, Brian Griffin, who is the biggest supporter of Trace, has been. He was first. He's always the first. I always ask him first, and he always is the first one. And he never quibbles. He just sends something amazing, and he did that. And I'm so grateful to him and all the others. And so we just had the space, and we had it for a week. And in that week, we sold £10,000 worth of work. Amazing. And we split, so it's 50-50 with the artists and 50% for Trace. It cost £1,000 to do it, so we ended up with £4,000 just to go towards our projects for the coming year, which was just enough to pay for the projects that we were going to do. And then the artists all got the £5,000, and in between whiles, everybody was coming along. People were bringing their students. All the London universities were bringing their students, because they said, this is the history of photography on your walls here, so we had the most amazing fun week. And so that was that. I put that in there partly because we will talk about the COVID portfolio at the end. And this was what was in the back of my mind in setting that up. I was thinking, well, we did it for the Trace edition in 2004. What's to stop us doing it again, but for charity this time? And it could have failed miserably, but happily it didn't. So, and I think what was actually the other nice thing about this was, obviously, a lot of people were getting their first ever show. Yeah. But not only that, they were getting their first ever show in Cork Street, so that was quite nice. And
you mentioned, some of the artists' work was bought by institutions, and it's so hard for artists to get into institutions. You've really enabled lots of artists to move their career forward in a way that they might not have otherwise.
And it was international audience, because people coming over from Photo London and coming in to see us, and in that opening weekend, we had incredible, can't remember if it was an opening or a closing that we did. It might have been the closing. We tend to do that. And anyway, so at the same time as all that was going on, I was doing this, which was some kind of jelly mould action.
I love that you're still working with jelly mould and blancmange. It's finding very inspiring and exciting.
Well, I stopped, which is a real shame, but I think I'm going to have to start it up again, because I was sort of looking at these thinking, I miss them. So this was called glowing, and it was sort of, yeah. So it's quite sort of performative, very much dealing with things to do with absurdity, and I'm very inspired by, I mentioned cinema before, but it's not like proper cinema. I love really rubbish cinema. So things like science fiction and The Blob. And I used to, when I was a student, I'd spend all my time at the Scala going to see things like Son of Blob and The Wild Women of Wonga, Plan 9 from Outer Space, all that stuff. I love it. And and it's just the politics of it as well was of the time. So it was very much nuclear war, all those sort of things, and aliens from outer space and things going horribly wrong. And it was the same. It was literally at the same time as the Iraq War, which I was horribly against and so angry about in the most hideous way. And as a mother of sons, it was kind of like I didn't go through all that labor to, have them go off to war. Not that they were that age, but it was like if they'd been older, that sort of thing. And it's just that, the fact that they should have been talking to each other instead of, these bloody men doing stupid stuff. And so it was all to do with the absurdity of that. That was why they look pretty stupid, these things. But I wanted them also to look very, very beautiful. So I shot them in the best possible way that I could. So they were these very sort of beautiful things. And so it was, anyway, that was them. And then it was around the same sort of time. Everything happened at once. I realized I was sort of looking for some work today, and I was going through 2005, 2006, just Googled that into my computer storage, and all this stuff came up, and I just realized I was just everything happened in these 2 years, like a lot of stuff at once. So it's all a bit blurry. So we were making books as well. So we did our first ever book for Trace, which was Mark Hayworth Booth's first book of poetry called Wild Track. And that was, we'd never done a book before, had no idea how to do a book. A good friend of mine, Simon Standing, did the book design, did a wonderful job. And we just sort of got it printed and sorted it, and it was an absolute joy to do. And so this is Mark's opening, and his book signing in my front room, and there's my eldest son there in the back there, so he was there, and then we took it to Paris Photo and did a book signing there, so that was very exciting. And then we did another book, amazing book, Imagine Finding Me, by Chino Otsuka, a very, very wonderful artist from Japan, based in London. And then she did an In Conversation with Sophie Layton, and we had a little exhibition for her at Trace, and I think this opened a few doors for her, this book. It was again very lovely collaborative project to do, and it was all her work. She was a writer as well as a photographer, and she made these very beautiful kind of prose poems, which were spaced through the book at the back. And then the other book that year that we did, which was Marjolaine Riley's very wonderful book, Philomona, which was another fantastic project to be involved in. So yeah, I really love doing books. So and I've done, this was a bit later. This was with my students at Falmouth. It was a fundraiser, called Say Cheese, and they had this idea of well, at the time there was something called Polaroid, which you could put through your photographs and turn them all into Polaroids, and so this was the sort of theme, and so we came up with this idea, and I got the students to invite all their favourite artists, favourite photographers from all around the world to donate a recipe, rather than, you know, it was, and so we got, you know, Alex Soth put something in, Martin Parr, you know, some really amazing artists in there, and then we got the students to illustrate it, and they were trying to do like very proper food photography, and I said, no, I don't want the proper food photography. I want your student filth. So
you want the absurdity.
I wanted the reality of what it's like to be in a student kitchen in all its glory, and they were like, okay, so they came up with it. So this is a couple of examples, and we had so we're selling the prints. So this is we launched it at Trace Mark II, which was our place in Cornwall when we moved there, and so you can see this is the book launch there. That was a lot of fun to do. Yeah, I know I'm banging on. I'm not giving you space. Do you want to speak?
No, I'm thoroughly enjoying this, Sian. I'm aware that we're going to have to go a little bit quicker because
okay, I'll speed through.
But before we do, can I just briefly ask you, because I'm sure lots of people who are watching might be wondering, because photography books are very popular now, and they've gone through lulls of not being, and now they are again. And in your experience of making books, what are your top tips for anyone approaching photo book for the first time?
Top tip for approaching what, to make their own book?
Yeah.
Or to
you've gone through quite a journey with many photographers, supporting them on making photo books and poetry books.
I think to have a fairly clear idea, but not too fixed, so that you don't rule, you know, don't edit it too hard. That would be my first top tip. Just be open to, I always ask, whenever I do a book with anyone, I'll ask them to put, I want to see everything. I don't want to see the tight edit. I want to see the stuff that has been edited out. So, and I think that's, because sometimes the other thing as well that you need to do is, you know, you do, it's true, you have to kill your darlings. So you will have favorite pictures and things that work really well, and it's like, no, that is my book cover, that is it, and you look at it and you think it doesn't work with any of the others because it's so strong on its own, and it has to go, you know, because a book is, yeah, so quite often you have to be a lot more open to being quite you know, quite reckless. I think you do need to be a bit reckless.
Yeah, I think that features in so much of your work, actually, this recklessness, this determination that you will make things your way.
Yes, but I think you have to listen to people as well, and I do listen to people as well, even, but it's, you know, it's still up to me to make the decision in the end. But it's like, I'm just going to whiz through those. Well, this was another residency, but I'm going to, yeah.
I love that this playfulness has continued to feature in your work, but also that the sculpture and performance, with that being, you were originally trained in sculpture, how this sculptural form has stayed strong within all of your practice.
Yes, well, that's kind of, well, that's what I know more about. I mean, I think also the performative, I didn't pick up on the performative side of things until a lot later. And of course, just the act of making a photograph is a performance. You know, you're performing behind the camera, you're performing in front of the camera. And I didn't kind of realize before that, you know, well, for me anyway, my camera is my partner in crime, you know, and it will it's daring me to do things that, you know, so it will be, so like this notion of recklessness is like, well, the camera is saying, go on, do that, you know, and it's busy doing that all the time, and it's like, I dare you, you know, and it's like, no, I can't do that, I'm not going to do that, you know, and the camera's saying, come on, you know, and it's like that's what it's like. So
I love that the camera is your partner in crime. I think I'm going to have to take that away from today and try and see my camera as my partner in crime.
Yeah,
it dares me to do.
It does. And then mine, the last, well, if I go right to the very end, because it sounds like we need to just move on a bit, because I do want
to... Still a bit of time. Don't rush too much, especially not through your work. We want to hear and see your work. Okay. So don't rush too fast.
Well, okay. So with this idea of performance, because somebody had written in an essay years before about the landscape work that that the work that I was a performance artist, even though it, you know, but it was kind of like you called it avant-garde gardening, which I quite liked. And I was thinking, when I got this was a residency in the Czech Republic in Brno for about 6 weeks, and it was all about the theme, under the theme of work, and no one's ever seen these before, so I'm just showing you these because these are the sort of side project. No one's ever seen.
We have a Sian Bonnell exclusive.
Yeah, it is, but it's very much in progress. But the thing was that I really would love to do this in real space, but I think probably we've done it already. But I was looking at these. I had the working title of Love Your Workforce, and so these were sort of work spaces, or, you know, institutional spaces in the Czech Republic, in I think it was in a halls of residence, this place, and then what I did was I made them, I photocopied them up big, and then I chopped them up, and then I made them 3-dimensional, so that you actually had to sort of, so they became very sculptural, so that you actually sort of, so that's why they're all at these strange angles in this one. And then I found magazines in the shops of, you know, sort of like how to make your home nice, but Czech Republic ones, so it was slightly different to what you'd have in the UK. But I was intrigued with all of that sort of domestic, how to sort of tart your house up thing, and I thought, oh, how can I make these spaces nice and homely, so, you know, so that your workforce will want to be there, so you don't like comfy chairs and nice plants. And so I spent ages doing that with just these things, and so this is a project that I would love to take on further. This is very much sort of just a very rough idea, so this is a bit of an exclusive preview, but I dump things because I get busy. And then,
well, you do so many things. You're curating, writing, educating, publishing, and making your own work.
Yeah, well, there isn't time to do all of it, and unfortunately the educating takes over most of it, which is really annoying. but anyway, so this was also at the same time, I thought, well, I'll come in front of the camera, because if there is a performative element, I need to find out what it is. So, and I had all this sort of stuff, because it was, the theme was work and the European Union and all of this, and what's the opposite of work? Well, play or stress or any of those things. And it was kind of a mixture of both those things that I was dealing with in this residency. And I thought, I'll get dressed for work under European Union health and safety guidelines, but using domestic objects and or elements of play. So this was me getting ready for work, and I made a video. This is why it's such poor quality. It was a video grab, and I set it up as a portrait, thinking, having never made a video before, thinking, oh, well, obviously it's portrait format, so I must put the video portrait, but not realizing afterwards that when you play it back, you give your audience a crick in the neck. And I thought, oh, this is terrible, I can't. So I didn't do anything with it. And then, of course, now thinking back to it, I'm thinking, great, I want my audience to have a crick in the neck. So I will, you know, so I've got to edit these. I haven't.
Yeah, make them work to watch it. It's all work.
I think it's quite interesting. So it'd be sort of like performative on the other side as well, on the receiving end. And anyway, so this didn't really work as a video, obviously. This is me ready for work with everything, the visor and gloves and stuff. It was a bit like COVID, doesn't it now? The sort of PPE.
Yeah, we're in PPE indeed.
Yeah, and then I got a fellowship at Arts Institute at Bournemouth at the time, and for a year in 2007. Part of it was only one day a week, and I thought they wanted me to sort of make a piece of work for it, and I thought, well, I'll explore what it's like to be in front of the camera then. And so I made health and safety. There's 9 of these, but just showing 3 for the moment because they're a bit similar again to all of that. But this opened up a whole load of new things for me, in that it was suddenly, you know, I was in my 50s, I was in front of the camera at a time when you're not meant to be, and because I think, you know, if I remember rightly, there was a quote from Sarah Lucas at the time, and she was in her 40s, at deciding that because she was in her 40s it was time to get behind the camera. And I thought, oh, I don't know about that. And so I thought I'll come out in front, and I don't like having my picture taken, so that was the other thing. So it was like having to sort of suddenly, I felt a lot more comfortable once I got my goggles on and everything. I couldn't be seen, but it was interesting to do. And there's another body of work that was a sister work that went with it, called Health and Safety, which was much more absurd. And the absurdity really came to the fore in that work as well, which was interesting. So it became very, very theatrical. I started using costume, which I'd never thought of before as well. So the costume suddenly became a thing. And but at the time I wasn't assimilating it, so I couldn't, you know, we were saying the other day, work takes time. You need time to assimilate these things and for it to trickle through. And I'm a bit of a slow developer on these things. Going back to earlier work, the one with the customs house, where my imagination became a thing, a driver. I realised this was another residency in Ireland, in Sirius residency in Art Centre in Cove in Cork, and it was an amazing 8-week residency, this one, and it rained more or less all the time, and I worked out that I could use my imagination to will things into place or to be in a picture, rather than just using an object and then willing it, or a person and willing it. So it was this idea of actually making, so this was a series which has since now been called something like Looking for the Other Crowd, something like that. And I'd read this book while I was there. I couldn't get inspired at all. I couldn't make any work. I just moved to Cornwall, and I really wanted to be at home with my family, and I had to be in this residency miles away. And it was like, and I spent a year apart from the family because we were half in Dorset and I was in Cornwall, and yeah, and this was the point when we were all going to be together, and I couldn't be with them, and I was feeling a bit resentful. So so I was a bit grumpy, and I couldn't make the work. And then I read this book that I found down there. So I thought, well, I'll read up about Irish history, because we weren't taught it at school. Again, really terrible education system that we have, where hopefully now we're going to decolonize the education system, I hope, and children will be taught all the terrible things the British have done. And one of the worst things they did was in Ireland, and I read all about it and I was horrified. And then read this other book which was called Meetings with the Other Crowd, and it was all about fairies and the line influences and being taken to a fairy fort and hidden away. And I found it's really intriguing. So I made this piece of work that was all about the places where you could be cast astray, you know. And fairy forts always had straight lines leading to them and grass paths. So this was like and then the other half of the residency was this notion of superstition. And I made this series of work that was about superstitious things. And half of it was real things. This is a real one. And half of them were made up. And I didn't say which was which. And a lot of people, when they sort of saw them, were like, oh, yes, I know that one. But they were, a lot of them were made up. But this one is bad luck, actually, to have a hat on the bed. So don't do it.
I know that one.
No, I found
the shoes on the table, but didn't know the hat one.
Yeah, the shoes on the table is very bad. And so, yeah. So that's what led me. I'd just sort of done all of those things and was assimilating all of that. And then I had the best opportunity in my life ever, which was to go to Rome. And it was life-changing. It was life-affirming, and, you know, properly engaged me back again with my work. And it was just fantastic. And also the most amazing, beautiful place that I've ever been in. You know, I love Rome. So so these started off as being I was wanting to do something around superstition and religion. I won't go into a huge amount of it, but I ended up sort of being intrigued by Renaissance painting and pre-Renaissance painting more than anything, and the gesture. So the unspoken words, unspoken communication that was carried through generations, and kind of taking ownership of it as a middle-aged mother, female. And so this is why I'm wearing a house coat, a sort of Italian mama's house coat, and a plastic picnic plate halo. And I was making all these halos. Yeah. So it's just a few of these, and it was all from one very, very big painting. And so in this painting there's hundreds of people, and they're all different. There was men, women, holy people, not holy people, and I was being all of them. But somebody said, well, these self-portraits, but they're really not, and none of them with me in them are, because if it was a self-portrait I wouldn't be able to do it. But these are very much self-stagings, which is what Claude Cahun used to call it, and I'm so with her on that, in that, you know, so it's, you know, it's very much, it's an object, it's her, nothing to do with me. And this is a famous painting that you might recognize, the Annunciation. And then I got into wanting to do much more kind of extreme poses. So my friend Cordelia Waugh, who was there, I met her there, she was looking at, her research was alternative stigmatics. And so she gave me these pictures of St. Catherine of Siena receiving the stigmata. And I won't go into huge details of that now either, because it's quite complicated, but you have to take my word for it, she got it. So that's me being, well, that's St. Catherine of Siena receiving the stigmata. And it's me trying to be two-dimensional. So that was through the ages. And
you mentioned earlier, Sian, about how uncomfortable you feel in front of the camera, yet you push yourself to do this. What is it that drives you to work through that uncomfortableness?
Well, the thing is with this, this is because I've gone through it at this point, because you have to, it's a bit complicated, but you have to get into a zone, a sort of creativity zone. So you kind of go off on one, literally. So, you know, you're kind of away with the fairies. But you've got to do something to create that space, to get yourself into that sort of trance-like state. And I realized that what I used to do with this was, you know, I would, when I did have a studio years and years ago, I would sweep it. even if it didn't need it, but it would be like a mindless occupation to put yourself, you know, it's almost like a Newton's cradle, and you have to get this momentum going of this mindless activity. It's like, right, I'm there now, and I've got this idea, I'm going to do it, and you just work through it, and you don't stop. And of course the camera is driving you, so, and that was how it worked, and that's how I got past. And also it was just me in the room, so there was no audience, it was me and the camera, so we were kind of communing, and that's how it worked. These were, when I made the other two works, it got shown in Rome at the end of the residency. They have an exhibition, or the artist show, and it's opened up to the public. And the work that I showed had a very, very strange effect on everybody that came in. And I said earlier, I'm used to people laughing at my work. And these pictures were funny, some of them. I mean, they were funny. And so, and I knew I was working with the humour, and I was fine with that, because I thought, well, they're bound to laugh because they are quite funny. And but what I wasn't expecting was that literally on the turn of a sixpence, it would be like they were in floods of tears, and people were like really, really, really upset and moved, but not upset with the work as such, but they were moved by it. And I that completely threw me. And then this work, which was on the back of, this was the last thing I did in my residency in Rome, my fellowship there, which is the 9 Manners of Prayer of St. Dominic, where I reperformed those. I'm just showing 3 of these now. This work, when I showed it, when I got back home to England, and I showed it to various people, and they were angry, and they hated it, and they were cross with me, and I was ashamed of it. And this was the thing that's like, I couldn't explain it, and it was like, I feel shame with this work. And it was just the strangest feeling, and very uncomfortable, and I've never felt anything quite like that before or since. And it forced me to do something completely reckless. So I did a PhD in a year.
It's a massive shame that you feel that about this work, because it's really beautiful work, and
well, I couldn't talk
about how other people's experience of work can shape your own.
I think sometimes you do feel you make work that you don't know what you've done, you know, and you have to kind of work it out. So I did. It took me a long time, and I've been working sort of through it, but and actually it's only now just beginning to get to a point where I'm thinking, I think I know roughly what this is about, this stuff, because people thought, oh, it's religious, but it wasn't religious. It wasn't about being religious, but there was a religious element in it. And but it was very much about performing. It was very much about the space, you know, or like the artist cell. So, and it was very much like going on a retreat. So it was kind of like, it had this spirituality element to it, but there was other things going on as well. And then 3 years later, I went back, because I had, you can go, I find that I go back every 3 years there, but I think I might have stopped now. And then this was 3 years later, and this was just taking that idea forward a little bit, but starting to remember a lot of the things that I'd been doing with the earlier work, with sculpture and objects and kitchen implements and all those sort of things, and just, you know, and also being the work and being the sculpture and being the objects, so that it was about that. And sort of so, and then 3 years later, and then this so, and then incorporating George, my husband, you know, he got coerced into being Karl Lagerfeld one day, and with Betty being Choupette. This was the last thing we did before we left Cornwall. But it was, I don't know how he did that actually, because he's not usually that compliant, but and then exhibition. So kind of Trace moved on into different things. So this is an example of one of the Chinese things. shows and the sort of.
So is this one of the works when you've taken the young graduates' work?
Yes, yeah. This was in 2017, and
it's a fantastic opportunity for graduates to be able to have, you know, their work chosen by you and taken to an international audience.
Well, it was interesting because I mean, it's quite a long story about the China shows, but in a nutshell, it wasn't so much the best of in terms of graduate work. It was looking at it was very much a kind of research study on what they're being taught or what they decide to make projects about, and how those of us that teach that are probably here today, you know, we all know that we're always going to find a project in a current third year that somebody's done something about Granny's cupboards, and somebody would have done something about being in outer space, and somebody else would have done something documentary. And, you know, there's always these sort of very similar ideas that float around. And I had gone around, because I select from universities from all over the whole of the UK, so that's Northern Ireland, Scotland, Wales and England, so it's like keep it really broad and just to see a very big picture. And I was sort of selecting the best of these kind of tropes that kept turning up, and it was just quite interesting to see how it sort of moved through. But I think wherever possible, I would, because it's China, you can do big shows. So I was showing massive numbers of student work, and it was a thrill to do it. But yes, it's a project that needs to be unpacked and was going to be unpacked this year, and one venue ditched it, which I was not very happy about, and but then the other venue, which was in China, they really wanted it in Wuhan in a museum, where it'll probably happen next year. But so there is going to be more about it and a book that goes with it. But it's really exciting. I've loved doing it. But it was one of these things that it just got a bit too big. So I need to kind of step back, and I think I'm going to hand it over to somebody.
Oh, you need staff, Sian. You do so many things. I think you need more assistance.
I do need staff. Yes, I do. So, and then just, this is very early student work. Again, when I first started using the camera, and then realizing when I did the PhD, I was sort of going right back as a procrastination to not write things, was just thought I need to go right to the very beginning. Didn't really need to, but I think it was very useful. And so these were things that I was doing in my second year, where I was just finding these disparate objects that were units of units, basically, like cubes, taking Cézanne's starting point as, you know, cones, cylinders and spheres, that sort of thing, and using these geometric shapes to just play with the camera and make different configurations. And of course, that was what drove me to the latest playful stuff. But I don't know how we're doing for time. I think maybe
we have a few minutes, but we need to wrap up quite soon. But it'd be good to see your latest work, latest things you've been doing.
I might go beyond this, which I don't think we need that really. Whoops. But I was taking Duchamp's 3 standard stoppages as a kind of starting point. This notion of chance and effect, basically, what's going to happen. And then also at the same time, this other notion of what if there's nothing there to work with? How can you make work out of nothing? And how can you work with what's there? So I had this these teeth that I took with, I did actually take some false teeth, joke teeth with me. And I was looking at the notion of abject and what it's like to be in front of a camera when you take pictures that the camera doesn't want. You know, what does the camera want? And I turned my camera to automatic completely, so that which is kind of anathema to photographers, isn't it? So it was like, you know, and I was just like, well, I'm not interested in all the technical stuff. I'm just, it's the conceptual elements that were the key things, what was going on here. And just worked with what was around in the studios, and seeing what, I mean, you know, dealing with things that's afterwards. I think, I can't show that to anyone. That's absolutely, this is so on the edge, this picture, but why is it that? Because it was, in my mind, I was being Long John Silver, you know, it was very playful, but again, it's like, oh, and then there's, this goes right back to my sculptural roots, where there was a pair of trestles, and it's like, well, you know, as every configuration of trestles in this space, and then brooms. So paring it back, simpler and simpler. And that was where I ended up work-wise. And then this is the sale that we did.
That's your most recent work you've been doing, and this is the most recent output from Trace. I'd love to, can you just tell us what you've been doing in response to the COVID situation?
Well, I couldn't make any work. I just didn't have the headspace for it, because I was worried. And I was worried about the people that didn't have what I had. You know, I live in the most beautiful part of the world, in the Pennines, and I just started my veg plot, and I was lucky I could get out in the garden, and I was just worried about people that couldn't do that, and the government weren't talking about any of this, and I couldn't sleep. I wasn't the only one. Everyone, I think, has had similar stories, and it just the whole thing has just been very, very strange. And but I remembered, I thought, what can I do? I was thinking, what can I do? I've got to do something. And then I remembered about the Trace edition. I thought, well, maybe we could have a print sale, and that's how it just started. And I just asked a few people, and then asked Brian, just messaged him, and you know, straight away he sent me that back. That's the first thing to come through, you know, and it just, that's how it has started. And then I got together with, you know, it wasn't just me, there was a team of us, and I did actually have three co-people that were really key, and that was Tracy Marshall, who was brilliant, and she was very much the sort of business end, and then there was, and the marketing end, and then there was Charlie Meacham, who was printing in our studios, and then there was Seb Chowdhury, who was just incredible, Seba, just helping with setting up the website, setting up the shop, coordinating the prints, orders for Charlie, you know, so it was a real team effort. It wasn't just me. And we all thought, if we're lucky, we might make £5,000. And we were like, that would be great, you know. And we were going to split it between the two charities, Refuge and Crisis. And they were on board, and they just said, well, you might make 5,000, that'd be great, you know. Well, after the first, within 12 hours of launching, we'd made 10. So, you know, and it was time limited for a month, £50, everything £50. And the rest is sort of history, and people kept joining us. So like people like, you know, Julia Fullerton Batten amazingly came forward and said, I want to contribute something, and it was like, wow, that's, you know. So, and then straight after her it was Hannah Starkey got in touch, you know, and then Karen Knorr, and so we were, you know, we were incredibly lucky. People just sort of came forward and contributed.
So how much did you end with?
We ended up with, and we didn't take anything for ourselves at all. We had to cover costs, obviously, and Charlie kept the print costs really, really low, stupidly low. And we ended up giving the charities between them £72,400.
That's amazing. Well done.
So that was nice.
Yes, that's absolutely brilliant. I mean, at a time when so many things are happening to so many people, your first thought is, what can I do? And you stepped up and...
It wasn't just me, it was a whole bunch.
You collaborated with a whole great bunch of people and had the idea to take it forward, and that's incredibly inspiring. And that's something that's featured throughout your career. Just, you look at a situation and go, what can I do? You move somewhere new and you have a great house and not enough people around you, not enough artists, and you go, what can I do? I'll start doing shows. You take residencies on. There's a real bravery throughout your whole practice of looking at situations and just making things happen.
Well, thank you. I think it was just, I don't think I was the only one. I think others have been doing it as well. So, but it's been fun as much as anything.
It's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you today, Sian, to both see your work and some wonderful exclusives and hear more about Trace. I'm looking forward to hearing more and more about the things you're doing. We've got some questions which Neve's going to come in with from our various audiences, both Facebook and in Zoom.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Sian. That's been really brilliant. We do have a few questions. First one, I think we've touched on it slightly, but it's from Shira, who says, hi Sian, what are you working on at the moment? What is in the pipeline for you? So I suppose really kind of what's next, like what are you looking forward to?
Well, thanks for the question, Shira. I think like everybody, I had a few things lined up this year which have been postponed, and I'm fingers crossed that they will happen. There was going to be a solo show, well, 2, and a book, and a first book for a very long time. So I'm hoping they will happen. In terms of new work, it's more like what I've been doing that I'm really been interested in doing is revisiting old work. So it's been very useful just spending some time over the last few months just sort of revisiting older things and then thinking how I might take them forward, because I do tend to think that we go round in spirals, so we don't really move that far from where we started from, I don't believe, but we kind of revisit things with hindsight or with experience. So I'm thinking about actively revisiting some early things. So I do want to get my jelly molds out again. I think that's going to be my first port of call, but I don't know what I'm going to do with them yet.
Definitely brilliant, thank you. We've got another question from Shona Beaumont, which is actually about working with childcare, and she said ironically she has had to leave slightly early to go and look after her kids. But she said, so good to hear of your work against the background of parenting. Did you ever find yourself frustrated by the invisibility/limitation of working as a mother with young kids? How would you advise early career photographers or researchers to hold their nerve through such a period, and how long does it last?
Ooh, what a question. Well, from my experience right from the very beginning was exactly those feelings that she has described, and a feeling, I think I touched on it, this feeling of sort of frustration and actually moments of resentment. I think, you're not meant to say that as a mother, but what I realized was that I could either go down that road of feeling resentful, or I could give myself a space of time that a kind of promise into the future of, right, I thought, okay, I'm not going to be able to make any work for 5 years while they're small. And so I'm just going to allow myself this 5 years to enjoy them, the children, and enjoy mothering, the sort of basic stuff. Well, I only needed to do it for 2 years actually, because people start, I was able to do the child share thing, and you suddenly found you had pockets of opportunity. And I suppose I can't remember her name that asked the question. Was it Shona? Shona, if she's anything like I was, she's probably thinking about the work all the time, So I had it whirring away in the background. So even if I wasn't able to make the work, I was thinking about it and planning it, and I wrote it down. So I would write things down and I'd read a lot. And then whenever there was a window of opportunity, literally, it could even be like George would take the boys away a couple of days, and I would have space at home, and I would just make the work, whatever it was, and it would just go, vomited out, literally, and it kind sort of like that, really like loads of work in a very short space of time. And I found that I would make a whole year's worth of work in 4 days, because it would have been going around in my mind all that time. So I think if you plan, you can plan. And so that's what you need to do then, is negotiate. So negotiate with friends, partner, family, whoever is there, and say, look, I know that I'm going to need the odd day to do some things for me, because if I'm not, as an artist, a happy artist, I'm not going to be a happy mum, and then my kids aren't going to be happy. So it's very important to maintain that feeling that you don't get ill. If you're not making it work, you won't be well. That was my experience, basically, is, I could have easily been unwell from it. And so I think it's planning and having a strategy and promising yourself things that you can deliver. So knowing that you've got X number of hours. So even when we had holidays, we'd go away to Wales and stay, in a caravan or something. But I knew that I could say to George, well, I want a day with my camera today. And I would go off and do whatever it was I was going to do. And then he would sort of look after the boys. So I think it's this negotiating and, sort of swapping. I don't know if that helps. And that's the practicalities side of it. And then in terms of just, I think just making sure that you have contact with other mums and other artists. It's really important to, and now that we've got internet, in those days we didn't have things like the internet, but you can do Zooms, you could have phone calls, you can stay in touch with people, and sort of plan to share things, and share a printer or share a camera, or share a space, and so that it could be that you can do things that way. I don't know how helpful that is, but that's kind of what I would do.
I think that's incredibly helpful advice, Sian. Myself, when I was also a parent of a young person who's now a lot older, it was finding the moments just to squeeze work in. And often I'd be more productive than I think I am now, with more available time, because I had such tiny moments to squeeze things in. I think you become a champion of squeezing things in around the cracks when you're a parent of young children.
I think the thing is that to remember as well that your work is going to be stronger because you're in the world, and you're fully grounded as a human being, and you're feeling frustrations and pain and anxiety and all those things that feeds the work. And you cannot live in an ivory tower. I know a lot of artists think, oh, to be a proper artist you just have to hide yourself away in an ivory tower and sort of keep away from other people and then make this amazing work. It just doesn't. I'm sure you can. Not everyone has got that luxury. The thing is to remember, though, that as an artist, as a photographer, you've got something to say to the world. You've got an experience that you've had that will speak to somebody else, and it's going to enrich your work. So don't see parenting as a blight on your work and time. It's like understanding that you can't do it all in a day or a week or a year or 10 years. The work has its own time, and it will dictate that. And you just need to understand that you can work with it, and that you've got something to say, that you are able, you're contributing, but you might not realize it.
No, I think that's brilliant. And actually, I think that not only does that apply to maybe parents as photographers, but also people that are juggling part-time jobs or other jobs, or students that are coming out of university and struggling with that lack of maybe resources that they've had for 3 years, or lack of constant communication. And I think that can be applied to a few different things, and it's important to remember that you should be contributing and you have a voice, and you should kind of find ways to maintain that
and stay in touch with people, because and also when it comes to things like boring stuff like finding money for stuff, if you are going to go for Arts Council funding, they tend not to like individual artists. They love artist groups. So if you're supporting each other as a group, you're much more likely to get funded. That's a top tip.
One other question from Kim Thornton. When you wear a costume, do you feel like you are playing a character or being yourself presenting an issue? Is it autobiographical? She too works with costume, and this is something I think about.
It's not autobiographical, and it's not about me creating an issue. So it's much more asking questions about what the costume is doing, and what the camera is doing, and what I'm doing, and how all those things interact with each other. So it's like, what is the costume? How is that costume making me behave? How does that costume make me feel? So I'll kind of forget me so much as like, what do I feel like in this costume? And different costumes will make me feel different things, and the camera will make me feel different again as well, because it's like, why is the camera making me do this stuff? And same with props. I haven't showed you on the website, if you go into the moving part, there's some videos on there that are very stupid, and there's one quite long one, it's 7 minutes long, with me and a load of boxes, and basically I've got this, it's just me and a box, and like, what do I do with the box? And the box is almost like my kind of companion in, I keep coming as criminal, but this partner in crime as well as the camera. So it's like, I have no idea before I get in front of the camera what I'm going to do with this box, and then it's all very kind of playful. So that's more how I work.
Watch that. It's an absolutely joyful piece of work, Sian, and brave. I constantly think you're brave putting yourself in front of the camera, and your playfulness and your unpicking of the world is constantly interesting.
Well, I don't know what to say to that.
I've managed to floor you with too many compliments. But it's really an absolute pleasure to talk to you today, Sian, and we've had some great comments going through with the audience and people watching live on Facebook. You've been a part of Format for so long, but actually it's been a real privilege to talk to you in more depth about both your practice and your curatorial work and your publishing, your education, and there's so many more things we could have talked about, but I do hope we keep seeing more and more of your own practice.
Oh, thank you. Well, thanks so much for inviting me and having me today. I've loved it. It's been really nice.